Good afternoon, everyone. Or should I say good morning, good evening? Welcome to everybody who's joining us from around the world as well. I appreciate you making the time to join us for our first webinar of 2025. This is going to be on systems thinking. My name is Tendai. I am an account manager here at the Civil Service College. I work with different governmental departments, majority of His Majesty's governmental departments, I should say. We'll be conducting the webinar as normal. A few housekeeping rules. We'll be monitoring the chat box. So during the process itself, during the webinar, we're going to be monitoring the chat box. There's some instances where Professor Stan Gilmore is probably going to ask you to contribute. Please feel free to use our chat box, and we'll be monitoring that. A little bit about who we are. So Civil Service College, we solely focus on understanding your organization's training needs, and we deliver tailored solutions. In the UK, we are a trusted supplier to the majority of His Majesty's governmental departments that include the Home Office, FCDO, Civil Service Commission, as well as the College of Policing. Some of our top series deliver are leadership and management, communication, and personal development. And without further ado, I'll pass it over to Professor Stan Gilmore, who is the person you've come to listen to today. So, Stan, over to you.
Thanks, Tendai. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely. Yes.
Lovely. So, as you had at the top of the event, we're going to talk about systems thinking today, and we'll touch on systems leadership as well. And we're looking at how this promotes professional advantage in what is a complex and becoming an ever more complex world. So welcome. Tendai said there's a chat box that you can drop thoughts and ideas in, and we'll be using that as we go through the webinar today because there'll be an opportunity for some interaction. So just to set the scene, we are living in a real complex and interconnected world, and we see that with the way that world politics has been moving and shifting, even over the last few weeks. The idea that problems can be solved in a linear way, that you can move from cause to effect, simply we can see is certainly not the case, that there are many different features of the world that impact on each other, and easy solutions or even indeed in some cases solutions are difficult to find. So we're going to talk today about how we navigate that complex world. And we're going to start with a little bit of interaction. I've got some questions here, and please use the chat, and Tendai is going to be observing that chat to come up with some ideas about what you think systems thinking is about and where you've observed systems thinking or its absence in your own workplace, and how might viewing challenges as interconnected systems change the approach that we take. So really just looking for your ideas and your thoughts and your insight here, and we can have a conversation about that. The basis of it is that, from Thomas Sowell, there are no real solutions. There are only trade-offs. There are things that we do within a system that are really about trade-offs with other parts of the system or other systems. To get to a point where something works is about getting the best trade-offs that we can get. And that's really all we can hope for. And it's not a kind of doomsday view. That is a practical view to say that we need to be working and cooperating with other people within our own and within other systems. So I'll give you 5 minutes here to think through what comes to mind when you hear systems thinking. Where, if anywhere, have you observed systems thinking or the lack of systems thinking in your work? And how might viewing challenges that we face as interconnected systems change our approaches to how we might want to deal with those challenges? So I'll give you 5 minutes. Please add your ideas into the chat, and we can start to unpick them in a few minutes' time. And feel free to build on other people's ideas in the chat as well. For those that are just joining, we're just adding some ideas into the chat based on those questions on the screen. Feel free to contribute. Still some people joining. We're just answering some of those questions on the screen. Please feel free to contribute or browse the chat yourself. We're going to come back in a second to start looking at them. Let's see what these ideas are pulling out around. What do we think about systems thinking? Where have we seen it working or not? And how might view challenges as interconnected systems change our approaches? Just got about a minute left. How's it looking, Tendai? Are we slowing down or are we still going full steam?
Well, we're still going full steam, but I was thinking, Stan, maybe we start tackling some of these. So I've got Lisa right at the top. Lisa, first of all, thank you for sharing your point. Lisa's from the Cabinet Office. I wonder if short-term or linear thinking that leads to immediate solutions in the immediate sense, but causes problems elsewhere. That's what she thinks.
Absolutely. And one of the issues with thinking that problems have got easy solutions is that that's often what's on the top of people's agenda is the easy solution. And they see a problem, they think, let's fix that problem. Once they feel they fixed the problem, they feel they can move on and focus on another problem. But we know that these issues are interconnected. And I've spent this morning talking to a group of managers, public sector managers about this and asking them for their ideas. And there are some real great ideas that have come out around how systems for building bridges or building railways or whatever really reveal those interconnected problems that if the issue is we need to build something, we don't take into account the effect that that will have on local communities, on road safety, on the facilities that are nearby to bring people to work on that building project, etc. We can start to fall foul of the inadequacies that come in through those kind of short-term approaches. So one of the areas where we see system thinking failing is when people approach something as a kind of linear, we have a problem, let's fix it, we're done now, and move on. And there's the unintended consequences are left behind them. Thank you for that.
Wonderful. So the next one will be, first of all, Sam, thank you for for participating as well. I don't think I've seen your answer. So if you can you just resend us your answer in the chat box? I've got Femi. His response was, his understanding of systems thinking was an appreciation of limits of our own roles and capabilities by better understanding how we fit within the system. I've got June as well, June K. I work in service review in local government, and as I move from one service to another or discuss projects with colleagues, it becomes more obvious how there is an interconnecting web in what we do. For example, housing, social care, regulation, and enforcement. I've also got Musa Mode. Musa is a technical advisor in Ministry of Justice, Uganda. So Musa, I haven't seen, sorry, I didn't see your response, but thank you for participating as well. So if you could, can you just share that in the chat box for us? Stuart Watkins, integrated care systems, clinical pathways, quality service improvement, and redesign. Then I also have Panogiota, a holistic approach to problem solving, perhaps, and that's got 6 likes on it, Stan. So don't know if you want to revisit that one. I've also got Andrea Fitzgerald, witness the systems approach in delivering place-based projects with regional public sector anchor organizations. We have Rob Costa as well. So Rob, would like to think we are doing it with work on ADHD, on neurodiversity, currently working across health education, workforce to find solutions to issues. I don't know if you want to address any
Yeah,
of these before I go on,
yeah,
Stan.
absolutely. So there's some common themes coming out of this, that there are some kind of root causes that need to be identified when we're dealing with some of those issues. And those root causes, the resources to deal with them are held largely in different parts of the system. And something that may be seen as a health problem will also have an impact on a justice issue. My background in running the Thames Valley Violence Reduction Unit was very much about understanding what those root causes might be and then bringing system partners together. We've kind of mentioned clinical pathways in that, and it's identifying whether a pathway even exists. And if one does exist, or is it sufficient to meet the challenge or the needs? How do we know what the needs are? Are we working with service users as well as organizational partners to understand what the needs are? So people are coming up with absolutely the right things to identify why systems thinking is important and where systems thinking works really well in that mix of different resources that are required to meet different needs as they come into contact with different services, and a lack of those, a provision for those services that creates vulnerability and maybe draws people into the justice system rather than keeping them in the health or social care system. So yeah, really important points that are being made there. Is there any further ones, Tendai?
Absolutely. So
Yep.
just going back after, so I've also have Farid. Farid is from the NCA, National Crime Agency. Systems thinking is an approach to problem solving that views problems as part of a wider interconnected system rather than in isolation. And I've got Zoe as well. Zoe previously when working as charity CEO with a local authority, children's services planning early intervention, lots of interconnectedness between the services children and families need to access, and so I had to think about the join ups. I didn't read that properly. So previously when working as charity CEO with a local authority, children's services, planning early intervention. So lots of interconnectedness between the services, children, and families need to access. So I had to think about the join ups. That was from Zoe. Then I've got Balvinder Singh. It's about time we had ID cards. Then Samantha Holmes. Systems thinking can be perceived as abstract without smart goals. I like that one as well. Joanna Thornborough, holistic was the word that sprang to mind, as with someone above, because I think we've had 2 points where holistic was sounded like a similar approach. Then we've got Louise as well. For me, systems thinking is about connections, interdependencies, and relationships. Understanding how changing one part may have an effect on another part or parts, not always positively.
Yeah,
Do you want me? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
perfect.
again, great points. And identifying, I think, in that last issue there that not all feedback loops are positive. Some are negative, and those are potentially the negative unintended consequences from some of the action that we might take. And the examples that are given of where joining the dots is really important to be able to provide sufficient support for people to either keep them out of exploitation, out of involvement with crime, organized crime, or in safe housing, etc. All things that are protective factors for healthy and safe lives.
Brilliant. I'm going to read the last few,
Yeah.
Stan. Then we can answer this. So we've got Terry as well. So Terry's from the Government Property Agency, and his response, or what comes to mind is uh, inter inter sorry interrepair interrepairability, tuning up systems. If we achieve it, we will save so much time and have one source of truth. And I've got Jade Davis as well. I'm Jade, and she's a microbiologist at Alpha. Interested in how systems thinking can be applied to scientific areas, which is very something different, and we like that as well. Um, I've got Andrea Fitzgerald, lack of all systems, approach whenever trying to deliver uh, interoperability across an organization's sector, region, etc. And I've got Mariana Clark, a whole system approach or process that doesn't cause collateral issues elsewhere in the process. And she's a high Mariana policing. Then we've got Rebecca Pike, and she's from the Environment Agency. So risk-based prioritization of challenges. Sorry, so risk-based prioritization of challenges. Farid, it emphasizes understanding the relationships and interactions between different components of a system to better comprehend how they influence one another and the system as a whole. Then I've got Erica, and Erica's from Jamaica. Systems thinking encourages a broader perspective, looking at the whole system and its relationships with each other rather than just individual parts. And I think most of them, having looked at most of them, I think, Stan, if we can address those, then we'll come back to the rest after.
Right. Well, they're
Thank
all great examples. And what we have here is some idea of those kind of key concepts that I anticipated coming out, and we're seeing that in your comments that are definitely coming through. It's about seeing how the whole system or whole of society even is impacted rather than just the isolated parts, those silos that we might be forced to work in for good operational reasons, but they don't always let us see um, the whole system. Gaining an understanding of relationships within systems and patterns within systems is really important as well. Are the things that we know, from research or even our own experience, that if we make a change here, we're going to have to think, who's going to pick up the demand somewhere else? There are legal obligations in terms of community safety, health, and well-being for partners to work together effectively for earlier intervention and early prevention. That's been mentioned already. How do we do that? How do we understand what it is we need to work on? What are the joint needs that we're all focusing on together? And are we working together to tackle those needs, or are we working together apart? Are we coming together once a month or once every 4 months to discuss what we've done whilst we've not been together? So working together, understanding the relationships we have with each other, but also with those people whose needs we're here to serve, perhaps, and considering both, and this was mentioned earlier, both those immediate issues of what do we need to do now, but what are the downstream effects? Or what are the downstream effects that we're only working on, those kind of tertiary problems that we often get bogged down in dealing with, and how do we clamber upstream into those root causes that we might have to deal with? And moving away from that linear cause and effect thinking, the thing that we say, well, if we've got a problem, we can fix it, and more into a many problems are not necessarily fixable without causing problems somewhere else. Resources moving from place to place cause gaps, cause service gaps, cause problems. So how do we tackle things in a more holistic, and that was mentioned a few times, way that deals with the overall issues without focusing too much on the problem that's right in front of you at the moment. And I think somebody else mentioned as well, and I hear this a lot. I did this presentation to the GLA a few months back, and the feedback I got was very much this, that there are people within your organization that you're not necessarily speaking to that deal with perhaps, as has been mentioned, with housing or antisocial behavior or youth justice. And it would be great to bring them into your decision making in order to come up with more effective and more sustainable actions. So moving beyond immediate silos, looking at kind of downstream effects on the immediate impact that you might have, and thinking about the multiple causes and the multiple effects that come when you work within systems. So brilliant feedback, guys. So systems thinking itself then, and this is by way of a definition of sorts, is it's a disciplined approach. So by disciplined, I mean it requires some thought and maybe some planning. And perhaps you need to think about how you would practically do this, how you would see the whole rather than just parts. So when you're working on something, are you comfortable? And somebody mentioned this single version of the truth. Difficult to achieve, but are you comfortable that you've got as much of the truth as you can get? And have you got a framework to work with that truth, with that whole system, rather than just in the siloed part maybe that you're working in, to understand the interconnections and the relationships? Can you map them out? Can you, whilst you're mapping, recognize the patterns and the feedback loops that exist? And by feedback loops, I mean very simply things that maybe have a cause and effect relationship. You know, the more people that are born, the bigger the population. The younger they die, the fewer are born, and the lower the population. I mean, there are feedback loops within things that can be affected. And we spoke this morning to a group about things like building railways. So, you know, build more railways, fewer people potentially are killed or injured on our roads. That creates a larger population, perhaps an older population that may require a move from emergency department care into maternity care or end of life care. So those feedback loops happen not necessarily with something that is obvious, but something that has identifiable feedback. And therefore, you're looking at both the short term and the long term consequences across systems. And you're embracing the complexity that there is in those systems rather than thinking you can fight it. You're not necessarily looking to reduce the complexity. You're looking to maybe even use that complexity in your favor by bringing more people into your decision making and ending up with a better result at the end, because you've understood that this is complex and this is difficult and requires a whole systems approach. So if we transition slightly then into systems leadership and the difference between systems thinking and systems leadership. Excuse me a sec. So systems leadership uses systems thinking in a way to guide how you manage your department, your team, yourself, perhaps your organization, in a way that has a clearer understanding of the entire ecosystem that you're working in, rather than just those things that are in your immediate purview. And systems leadership is about cultivating that awareness and the awareness that you're working in a world with interdependencies. and you yourself are building collaborative networks. You're working to identify who you need to network with and how you use your negotiation and influencing skills, your knowledge that you gain through networking of their needs, to build those trusted collaborative networks. And systems leadership is very much about identifying who you need to work with, who you need to learn from, and how you can build collaboration. And you do that by identifying that you can effectively work across functional boundaries, that you understand other organizations' needs, and you can figure out how to integrate their perspectives into your work and vice versa. And looking to identify and influence emergent behaviors. So this innovation that you seek to get within those new integrated systems that you're creating. You're looking to generate new ideas or novel ways of working that come from the collaborative networks that you're putting together. And using negotiation and influence is an important skill to learn, understand, and develop, because when you're dealing with people from outside your functional boundaries, there isn't the same hierarchical command and control system there. These people don't have to listen to you. They don't have to do what you want them to do, and vice versa. So you're very much dealing with informal negotiation and influence rather than formal authority that comes within your own organization. And that can be quite daunting for some, because perhaps for the first time they're trying to negotiate with others that don't necessarily have to pay any attention to their needs. So a different stance, and perhaps a more political one because of that. And as you progress through an organization, undoubtedly with seniority comes a greater small p political awareness that you have to have in order to manage those interrelationships and those partnerships. And that balancing between what you need to do now and how you need to adapt for the future is really important as well, because not everything can be dealt with as an immediate need and an immediate solution, and that's been mentioned in the chat already. And navigating ambiguity, there isn't always an answer to things, but one needs to harness diversity and diversity of thought, diversity of approach, in order to come up with better solutions rather than just simply this solution. And looking at working with communities, with individuals, but with other partners in order to navigate that ambiguity and get to a solution that meets most of the needs that you're trying to meet. So systems leadership, different from systems thinking, and it's about the skills that you learn and bring to join the dots between different parts of the system. And in order to do that, there are many frameworks and models out there, but here's a couple that are often discussed, certainly in my area of work, that a kind of description from several years ago from more of a military background, that in describing the environment as VUCA, as volatile, as uncertain, as complex, and as ambiguous. And the idea of using this framework as a way to understand the different pillars that needed to be worked on in order to somehow tame this system, is to say we need to understand just how volatile things are. We need to understand just how uncertain they are, how complex they are, how ambiguous they are, in order for our solutions to meet those conditions and deal with those conditions. The VUCA framework was somehow there to say that this was solvable. And then along came BANI several years later to say, well, maybe it's not all as solvable as we think it is. And those volatile markets or systems or environments, maybe they're not always volatile. Maybe sometimes they're brittle. They actually break. And we saw this in 2007-8 with the the banking crisis, where some of the ideas that things would go on the way they are forever suddenly broke. So no longer was it volatile; it was actually broken, and that uncertainty became anxiety. This constant anxiety that actually they're not just uncertain; they're not knowable, and that breeds a kind of an anxious mindset to say, well, we don't know if we're going to be here to do this next month, next year. So, what do plans that emerge from that system look like, where anxiety is feeding it? And the idea that things aren't just complex, but they're non-linear, that a small adjustment can make a big impact, or a big adjustment can make no impact at all. And an idea that you have to maybe look beyond the immediate and the traditional into what some of the root causes might be and what the feedback loops might look like in order to get your program or project into place and take advantage of some of that non-linearity, if you will, that we can make small adjustments to have big impacts, but we need to be monitoring them at the same time, because not only are they ambiguous, but they're also perhaps incomprehensible. They're maybe too complicated for us to know about. And we see this with the kind of emergence of AI, etc., that we can't always understand things, but we can track them. And we need to have tracking mechanisms in place and feedback loops in place so that we can make adjustments and make them rapidly. We can't wait till the end of a project and review it anymore. So those kind of frameworks, they're not the only two, but they are two frameworks that can be used simultaneously or independently as a way for you to start to think about what the environment looks like that you're working in. Is it volatile or is it brittle? Are things just uncertain, or is there anxiety? Are they complex in a way that is knowable, or are they non-linear and incomprehensible? And that can help you to understand how you might want to frame some of the approaches that you take to dealing with them, at least dealing with them in the knowledge that you're only ever going to be able to work on perhaps one part of the system, and the rest of it needs to be monitored for impact. But bringing these frameworks into your life and into play helps you at least explain why you're doing what you're doing, explain that you've thought through some of the bigger impacts than just the job that's on the desk in front of you. And it helps you build that influence and that knowledge that allows you to work collaboratively with partners in a more trusting and confident way, because you've built the sense that you are aware of things outside of your own reality. So we're going to have another few minutes shortly to look at the relevance of this. And there's been some comment already in the chat about relevance, but we're going to look at this maybe a little bit more deeply, just again for 5 minutes, where I'm seeking for some insight from you about how you might want to apply this specifically, systems thinking, maybe if you're in the right position, systems leadership, into...
Just message him to say that he's to be...
Thank you. How are you going to build some of this into your area of work, whether you're in policy development or in a leadership role, maybe some strategic planning that's perhaps your sole role or part of your job? Are you in a decision-making position, or are you there to build new ideas into things? So if you can have a little bit of thinking, we'll have 5 minutes again. Is there something that's on your desk at the moment, something that's challenging at the moment, that where you think actually a bit more systems thinking could add value to this thing that's on your desk? And I ask this because I often get feedback when I do these talks from people saying, actually, I didn't think about asking other people or seeking insight from other departments, even within my own unit. And now that you've mentioned it, I think I will, and I think that would add value. So any of those things that you can think of, it'd be great to hear them, and we can maybe have a short discussion. And how might your approach to this challenge change through a system lens? Are there any approaches that you might want to take that would actually benefit from pushing a systems lens onto things. So just 5 minutes again, same as before, in the chat. Things that you're working on, things that you think would add value. I'd love to hear them, and we can perhaps have a short conversation about them before we open up to maybe more of a group discussion. So 5 minutes, please, and 10-dial monitor. Thanks.
So I already have, sorry, so I've already got a few questions in there. I don't know if these are relevant to what you're asking now. So first one was from Balvinda. He's saying systems thinking, all assume everyone is a good actor. Why is there no consideration of bad actors? The second one is from Femi. What would be an example of when and where systems thinking would be a bad idea? Then I've got Stuart Watkins as well. Is there something here in system thinking and synergy with right-minded leadership? Then Fiona is just put in tackling antisocial behavior, strategic approach. Do we need to update 20-year-old legislation?
Yeah. Okay. So yes, I mean we do need to think about bad actors. Of course we do in all areas, and that perhaps leads to the kind of next point around where might it not work? Well, it might work if might not work if there is a bad actor in this, where somebody's perhaps thinking about ways to stall decision making by bringing in many spurious additional risks, and we've mentioned risk identification and management earlier as well. So like everything, you have to monitor for bad actors, and you have to be able to decide whether something is a valid avenue to go down or whether it's a dead end. But thinking through how your system looks and is what is being raised a valid part of your system and a valid area that needs to be explored is important. It's important to answer those questions, even if the answer is to do nothing. But at least it's there and it's pended maybe for the future as well. So yes, bringing in many ideas to gain insight and again on the legislative question, absolutely. Do we need stronger legislation to make sure we do work together more effectively? We brought this in on the back of some of the work I was doing around the violence reduction unit within Thames Valley was very much a move towards, are we working in effective partnerships for violence reduction, and do we need any legislative changes to make that happen more effectively? And we had the serious violence duty come in. So yes, look at what you're working with. Are the tools suitable for the need? If they're not, then there may need to be legislative or policy change. Some things are simple policy change that people think actually require legislative change, and they don't. They just require people to get permission or to give permission. And sometimes what sits behind a lack of permission is just fear. So, there is an approach that says you need to, in terms of your system's leadership, give people confidence so they're not frightened about taking a step that may put them in to somebody else's domain where they've got more control and authority than they do. So it's about giving up some of your power, if you will, in terms of making sure that the system works together more effectively. As we said before, that might need policy or even legislative change to do it.
Right, so we've got the next one after that. I think we'll just ask everybody to explain what they're working on. So I've got Marianne, a right care, right person, good example of system thinking or leadership in action. Then we've got June K. Could you say more about trade-off navigation, please? Then I've got Stuart Watkins, and system thinking applied to complex commercial procurement work plans and contract renewals. What would that look like? I've got Musa. Apply systems thinking in setting common strategic focus for the justice, law, and order section, where 17 institutions of government have to be supported to weave a common path of direction, set priorities, and agree on trade-offs for the common good, if as a collective we have to leap forward using limited resources. I also have David Marsh. Tackling underage vaping, trying to look more broadly than just attempting to prohibit access. Warner, tackling the lack of innovation and growth problem requires a more joined up approach across departments. If we can, let's keep sending in the questions and opinions. Honestly, we're happy to go through them.
Absolutely.
And if I've missed somebody, I do apologize. Please just give us a nudge in the chat box. But whatever you're thinking, please share. This is the perfect time to ask as many questions as you want.
So if I pick up on some of those points that are made, navigating trade-offs, it's knowing whether you have made a trade-off or not. So, have you started off with what you see as an optimum end result and you've ended up with something that is suboptimal? It delivers some of what you wanted to do. But what else has happened within that trade-off, and has that provided some additionality that you weren't expecting either? So trade-offs are quite difficult because it may feel that you've not got what you wanted, but actually on examination you may end up in a better place anyway. But it's understanding that you are making a trade-off and what you're giving up and what you're gaining as part of that. And this is what many people don't think of in terms of negotiation. They think a negotiation is about them winning everything that they want, but a negotiation isn't about that. And a negotiation is getting the best deal for everyone. So some people might feel that they failed if they didn't get everything, but when you go into a negotiation, going in with an approach that there will be some trade-offs, and those trade-offs may indeed build a better solution at the end, is a way to identify where you're winning within that negotiation, not just winning with you getting everything you wanted. The way that those things happen within procurement, so the next point that was made is, what do your procurement loops look like? Are you procuring things against, or what are you procuring them against? Have you got requirements for your procurement? Are those requirements in a way that can be potentially measurable? Are they being measured? Are your procurement teams getting any feedback on the delivery of whatever it is that's being secured to deliver the outcomes that you're looking for? So have you got sufficient procurement loops in place so that you're getting good feedback on whether your procurement system is working effectively for the outcomes that you want? Many procurement departments don't have that feedback. And looking at things like, social value within that, how much of your procurement is focused on gaining social value, and is that social value worth the extra effort? Are you monitoring it? Are you measuring it? Are you making adjustments in your procurement in order to benefit, to provide more benefit into the system? And this approach to are we prioritizing the common good is one that I've certainly used a lot to say, there are many different organizations that play here. They may feel that they all have different things they're trying to achieve with limited resources, but the one thing that they have in common is that they're all seeking to improve the common good. So building a system that identifies what that looks like is a really good way of understanding where you might want to put those limited resources into places that are positive, maybe into places that focus on behavioral change and not just on limiting access, to the point on vaping, and where those nonlinear systems come into effect to say we can affect a small change which will have a bigger outcome. We have limited resources. That small change, that big outcome, will have a big impact on the common good, and maybe one that gives us more of an effect than we would have had if we'd spent a lot of money on something that's only going to have a small effect, like banning something perhaps. So thinking through in that systems way and how you can work with others, how you can make the best of your limited resources, how that feeds into procurement, and what trade-offs you might have to make in order to get your procurement in the right place, is a really good example of what systems thinking looks like.
Oh, we can.
Hello. Sorry, can you please mute your mic? Sorry, son, let's go. Yeah.
Yeah. Any more?
Yes, so I'll ring through them and hopefully you can hear all of these as well because I want to make sure everybody gets a fair crack. So we've got Terry, government, that's the government property agency. Comms or buy-in has got to be a critical factor to successfully implement change. I've got Femi as well. How far is systems thinking simply a way to get managers and decision makers able to deal with ambiguity? Then we've got Elliot. How do we reconcile the fact that the evidence base for policies or programs is often from controlled environments with usually a simple cause and effect model? What's easy to evaluate and analyze might not be conducive to good systems thinking that can be implemented upstream. I've got Louise. Central to systems thinking is always knowing who your systems thinkers are. It comes very naturally to some, and they are very often also highly skilled but undervalued generalists. Specialists with thorough but profound knowledge will be useful, but a systems approach you go nowhere without people who can join dots, build relationships, and create meaningful connections. It also takes time. This sort of trust and credibility can't be developed in 5 minutes. Then Joanne said trade-offs need to operate in all directions with those involved. How do you incentivize the right behaviors? And how do you, Elliot Karen from NHS North of England, uh, how do s- how do you stop people at times of pressure reverting back to organizational priorities rather than system? Is that possible even? Then I've got Malcolm. Well, Malcolm is just saying thank you and he needs to drop off. Thank you, Malcolm, for joining us. But so, the last question was from Karen, which says, how do you stop people at times of time? How do you stop people at times of pressure reverting back to organizational priorities rather than the system? Is that possible even? That was our last question.
All right. Yeah, so I'll take them in order as well. So comms and buy-in part, yeah. Communication, really important. You know, the only person in the room who knows what I'm thinking and what I mean is me. Because when I describe this to other people, they place their own meaning on things. So in order to get buy-in, that you need to make sure that you're communicating frequently, and with the same, if you can, the same message delivered, perhaps even in different ways, but the same message there, because that frequent communication is really important to get buy-in. Not only do people gain greater understanding, but they feel that you are being consistent with your messages. They feel confident, more confident to deal with that. And the same with kind of dealing with ambiguity. It's to try and make things as least ambiguous as one can, to say that actually there are some kind of clear goals that we're aiming for, and there may be different ways to get there, but the least ambiguous part is the goals that we're setting amongst ourselves. And moving away from that policy view that there is kind of cause and effect, and if we can write a policy that solves a problem, the problem has been solved. We know that's not the case. We know that often policy is written from the perspective of the policy writer, the policy maker, rather than from what is known works or from what is known doesn't work, and from those kind of grassroots feedback areas that are not often generated when it comes to policy. And policy fails because it hits the ground in the wrong place. How do we analyze things? Well, quantitative analysis is often the easy way to say if we can count inputs and outputs, then we can do an evaluation. And we know that not everything is really good for quantitative analysis when it comes to outcomes. So we have to have a kind of mixed methods approach to say, actually, not everything can be reduced to a number, especially relationships. So we need to have some people within organizations and some resource and some time in order to conduct good qualitative analysis. And what I see in systems thinking in the context, certainly of the public sector, is qualitative analysis isn't always prioritized and isn't always felt to be as rigorous as quantitative analysis. And what I know about data bias, access to data, etc., I don't have a huge deal of confidence that quantitative analysis is actually measuring the right things even in a way that qualitative analysis can do. So mixing your analysis up. What's the mix between generalists and experts? Absolutely. They say the definition of an expert is somebody who knows what they don't know. And what I know is, that I'm becoming more of an expert every year. So how do you tally that up to find people who know a lot about something but don't feel they know everything? And how do you enable them to work with people that are very good at relationships, at generating collaborative environments, whilst managing the kind of outpouring from experts as well? And it's always all about relationships. Sometimes people say it's only ever about relationships. So the thing that generalists can be good at is building those relationships, those trusting relationships that we mentioned when we were talking about systems leadership. How do you incentivize good behavior? How do you get the trade-offs that are working effectively to deliver what's needed and not just an easy route for people to take? Well, that's about how you generate the kind of behavior that you want, and that's difficult. Again, it's been mentioned when pressure comes on, when people are pushed into resorting to their silos, because what that enables them to do is say, we are doing what's being measured. Have to measure the things the behavior that you want. So you have to adopt some of your personal development review processes to ask questions about how collaborative have you been, rather than simple questions about what have you delivered within your department. How are you working with partners effectively? Maybe do what some do about creating an award system for people that are collaborative, that support other departments. I've seen that working very well. But one of the biggest areas is the inspection regime. Inspections often focus on single agency or single organizations, and that forces people to stop perhaps doing what they were doing in terms of collaboration and focus on the things that they know are going to be marked by the inspectors. So this needs to be top to bottom. If people are going to be subject to external audit or inspection, then there needs to be a trade-off there to say, actually, some of the things that we do may not necessarily benefit our department or our government department. We may be spending some of that budget on making sure that other departments or other teams are more effective, and we need to be quite happy to do that within a collaborative setting. Yep.
Yeah, I think there was one. Louise just made a really good point. She said hitting the target and missing the point is and endemic in health.
Yeah.
So yeah, no more questions for now. Yeah.
Okay. So we're coming up towards the end of the session now, but we've got time to just talk briefly about some of those areas where you may want to start thinking about some of the personal and professional development areas that you would want to consider if you're going to use systems thinking, if you're going to develop your systems leadership capabilities. And it's about being able to employ that kind of diverse approach and that diverse thinking to your everyday life. So, are you the kind of person who is, good at identifying patterns within systems? Do you look at whole systems or not? So how can you develop your skills to think and view the world more holistically, to view things outside of the cause and effect within your own department, if you will? And then to look at how skilled you are in bringing other teams, other people from other departments or other organizations into your decision making and into your prioritization, into your trade-offs, if you will. And have you got those skills? And if you don't, how can you get them? And coaching and mentorship are really kind of good ways of doing that. Identifying people who have got those skills, observing them, trying to maybe copy some of those skills, but seeking their support in coaching and mentoring to develop those areas where you become more adaptive and more flexible in the way that you approach some of the things that are on your desk. that you include people within your decision-making circles, that you understand your own personal ethics and the values that you work to that are both personal and organizational, and how can you put them at the forefront of any decisions that maybe require a trade-off. You're trading off on operational capability, not trading off on your values, perhaps. And how can you build resilience in yourself and resilience in your teams to be able to deliver these outcomes that we're all seeking to deliver in our work, and making sure that you understand how to support and promote your own personal resilience, but also the resilience of your teams is a really important feature of not just systems thinking, but systems leadership. And so we come to that kind of closing reflection, and perhaps just for, a couple of minutes, maybe you could drop something in the chat to say, is there an insight that you brought to this meeting or you'll take away from this meeting that you'll seek to apply in the future? And that could be, the first step that you're going to take towards more effective systems thinking, or something perhaps about finding a coach or a mentor or reading a bit more about it. So please, just for a couple of minutes, drop some things in the chat about where you might want to go to next on this journey, where you might want to apply some of these insights, or how you might want to take next steps forward in systems thinking. We'd love to see them. Let's give 2 minutes for that.
Then I'm going to start reading some of these out
Please
to you.
do.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, we've got Jan. Thank you. Really interesting and reassuring to see. I'm not the only one with some of these questions and thoughts. Terry, thanks, Pro Stan. I like your reference to building resilience. We need more of that. Andrea, I will be working with my team to implement systems thinking in our approach to delivery. I've also got Jean. I've got Kay. So June K, I should say, mapping of relationships and feedback loops to identify patterns. Fiona, thank you. Have a workshop coming. Have a workshop coming up. Then Hussein, thank you. Then we've got Lucas. Can I have a recording? Yes, Lucas, we'll be sharing the recording with everyone after the session, probably in the next 72 hours, to be honest with you. So everybody will receive the slides as well as the video recording. Then we've got Marianne. An important takeaway for me is to look at the cause and effect outside on our own department. Super session, thank you. Alice says, I thank you. Miriam said, thank you. Hannah said, thank you. Paula said, great session, thank you. And we've got Stuart, use it in my customer engagements and realize systems thinking positives and negatives together. Then we've got Elliot said, thank you. Thinking about how we include collaborating into objectives. Good idea, and I'll rewatch this as Mr. Start. No problem. We've got Joanne, reflect more before I jump to decision making, like that as well. Amin, thank you very much. Yes, Terry, I'll share the slides with you, no problem. We've got Kamal, thinking about applying this in my department and classroom. And classroom teaching, thinking about how to teach my students to think holistically and systematically. Thank you. Then we've got Harry, thank you, very interesting. Musa, I'll be working on reaching out and harnessing synergies. My takeaway will be no linear thinking, no perfect solutions, but trade-offs. Super. We've got Barbara. Thank you. Very interesting. I just learned I have been using systems leadership for a while now without knowing that this is how it was called.
Great.
We like that, Barbara. Good stuff. Then we've got Musa again. Thank you, Professor. Great delivery. We've got Joseph. Sorry, we've got Abby. Thanks very much. Very conscious and easy to follow. Mike Young, thanks, very interesting. Then Jan, as a coach of senior leaders, this is so important to explore. Absolutely, Jan. Thank you. Then we've got Teo. Thank you. We'll definitely be discussing this with my colleagues at work tomorrow. Some others said, thank you. This has been a great opportunity to reflect on my systems work. Trade-offs was helpful to take forward. Anita, lots and lots of food for thought. Can you recommend any core reading materials, please? That's a really interesting one. Well, we're going to say thank you, everybody. Well, as you can see, we've got our feedback course, our feedback QR code on there. If you can, I would like you to just share your thoughts, whatever we've done well, what you'd like to or you'd like us to improve. That would be great as well. Another one from me, we've got Owen said, Elliot said, brilliant session. Thank you very much. We'll share the lots to reflect on. Would also welcome and recommend resources. Yes, so what I was going to say to everybody as well, we're still online. We will be monitoring this chat box for the next 24 hours. So if I missed anybody, I do apologize. If there's any questions that you'd like to ask regarding the course or anything else, regarding the course itself or the topic, we've got my colleagues' numbers up on the screen. Please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you very much for making the time. Thank you, Professor Stan Gilmore. Like I said, we're monitoring the chat box. If I've missed anybody, please do not take it personal. I'll try and make sure I get everybody. So there's one more. Chantel France said, great taster session. We'll look into this further. Absolutely. Please feel free. And I hope everybody has. I've got a hand up. Is that a question, or if you could type it in my chat box for me, that would be great. I saw a hand up come up twice now. No? Okay. So let's remember 72 hours from now, we're sending the slides as well as the recording for this session. We will be monitoring that chat box, like I said. And yeah, sure. Thank you. I mean, everybody, thank you very much. Obviously, Professor Stan Gilmore was the absolute star, and the tester session was brilliant. Like I said, if there's any more questions you might think of, just shoot them in our chat box. We'll monitor that for you. Yes, Fiona, you get access to the recording for this session. Absolutely. Right.
Great.
Wonderful.
Thanks,
Thank you, Professor. We'll speak to you soon. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye. Thanks.
You're welcome.